All right, I'm going to get started. My name is Kristen Montleon. I am the junior accountant at SBP. I started in November. It's been kind of weird being this early on in my tenure here and being at home, but this is my first accounting job. My original degree is in ethnic studies. I graduated in 2010 from American University in Washington, D.C. And I decided to pursue an accounting degree in 2015, I think. I graduated in 2017. Actually got a second bachelor's degree, so I was able to transfer a lot of my credits. In between those two college experiences, I was a barista, a coffee shop manager, a waitress, a freelance graphic designer, a bartender, a retail worker, and a gallery administrator. There were periods where I had up to 3 jobs. I'm not a financial advisor. Most of what I'm going to share with you is things that I learned during this period. Some of what I learned from accounting, and mostly things from actual experts. I want to stress that this is not necessarily advice, but knowledge that I'm sharing with you. I've been in serious debt. I've been behind on rent and utilities, and I want to give you a good foundation for what some basic financial terms are, and what some basic financial terms are, and some concepts that you should know, a little bit about budgeting, and resources that are available to you. If anybody has any questions throughout this, we're going to do questions at the end, but if you can go ahead and type things into the chat and I'll come back to them later. Also, if anybody can't hear me, let me know in the chat. I'm actually going to type that. So we're going to start off with the absolute basics of financial terminology and concepts. A lot of these things are things I wish I had known when I was first starting out managing my own finances. Thanks, Nicole. When I started managing my finances, a lot of these things didn't come naturally to me, and I don't feel that most high schools or colleges provide good basics for this, and it only depends on what your parents have taught you, usually, that you're going to know when you start financially managing your resources, and that can be hard. So the first thing we're going to do is terminology and concepts. Then we're going to talk about budgeting and why you might want to budget and how you should start. Then we're going to talk about savings, both why you should save, where you should start, and how to find savings in your regular spending. And then we're going to talk about resources that are available to you. And after that, I will take questions. I'm going to start with a quote. Money is something you trade your life energy for, which is from a book called Your Money or Your Life, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But basically, the resource that you have is your time and your energy. You don't have money to begin with. You're trading your time and your energy for money. It's important to remember that the most valuable resource is time and that you can trade that for money. Sometimes time can be more valuable than money also. Like sometimes you're just tired and getting takeout is a better option because you need to preserve your energy. Or maybe you're going to have your apartment cleaned before you move out because you need to work, and it would be cheaper in your time to have somebody come and clean your apartment than spending the day scrubbing trying to get your security deposit back. Or maybe it's something that you just can't replace the time, like going to your friend's going away party or something else where the event is more important than the shift you're going to take off of work. This is the only explicit accounting information that I'm going to share with you, and this is the accounting equation. Everything else I'm going to talk about is basic finance stuff, but this is actually the basis for all accounting. So assets minus liabilities equals your net worth. It's important to remember that the money that you have doesn't include the money that you owe. So this would be like anything that you take in isn't the money that you have. The money that you have is anything, I'm sorry, the money that you have is the money that you earn minus the money that you owe other people. So your assets are anything that's a resource of economic value. So that's the cash, like the money that you bring in, your income. And maybe if you got your tax return or your present from your uncle or something like that, that would be your income. And then any property that you're able to sell for income. So something like a car or a savings bond that you would be able to cash in, or your bike or furniture that you don't need anymore, that could all be an asset. Liabilities are something that you owe. So that's even the taxes from your paycheck, your rent, any credit card debt or student loans. So these are things that you have overall. This would include things that are long-term, like loans. We're not necessarily talking on a monthly basis when we're calculating net worth. That would be overall. And actually that book, Your Money or Your Life, recommends that you calculate your net worth for your whole time that you've been working. So I think that's a little bit extreme, and I think a lot of things about that book are a little bit extreme, but it is a good resource. But what they recommend is that you calculate every dollar that you've ever earned, and then every debt that you've ever incurred, which is like a huge undertaking. But that way you're able to see if you have net income or a net loss, which is something valuable to think about and a good way to look at your money situation, but overall not something you have to do to prepare a valuable budget, but just something to think about. So this is how you should be calculating your money. So we're going to talk about banking. That was the most technical thing I'm going to talk about. We're going to talk about banking now. So there are two types of bank accounts we're going to talk about. One is a checking account and one is a savings account. There are multiple types of checking and savings account, but I'm going to talk about the most basic types, which are the kind you should have when you're starting out. So a checking account is an account where you put short-term money. So this is where you're going to pay your rent out of, or buy dinner out of, or buy your groceries from. These accounts generally don't earn interest, so any money you put in there isn't going to gain any money. Sometimes they'll have low interest if you have a money market account or a more complicated, higher value account, but generally they're not going to. When you're picking a checking account, you should look out for a few things. Monthly fees are the big one. When you're first starting out, it's really easy to accidentally incur them, and then you might overdraft and get charged a fee for that. And you could also get charged for things that you don't need to be charged for. There are a couple ways on some accounts that you're able to waive a monthly fee, even if it does exist. So one of those would be a minimum balance. So sometimes if you keep, say your average balance in your account is $200, they won't charge you a monthly fee. Or if you have money directly deposited from your employer, sometimes they'll waive for that because they know there's money guaranteed to be coming in. Basically, banks are going to look out for themselves. So there are certain things, any money that you have in your account is money that they're able to use for their own expenses. So they want to keep money in your account. So any way you can prove to them that you're going to keep that money in their account, they're going to be pleased with you. Other things to look out for are what kind of overdraft fees the bank may charge. So usually they're like around, they're usually about $35 depending on the bank. But if you go into the negative on your bank account, it'll usually let you do that. And then they'll charge you $35 to cover it. So if you make a charge that makes your account go negative, then they'll be charged the fee. And then you're more negative and you have more money that you have to take out. So there's some ways to avoid this. On some bank accounts, you're able to keep it from letting you making a charge that will make your account go into the negative. Usually you'd have to use the card as debit to do that and not credit, but that works sometimes. And then the other option would be to link a small savings account to your bank account or to your checking account. And at some banks, that way it'll pull the money from your savings account. That's definitely something to talk to a banker about when you're opening an account. And that's the other thing I would definitely recommend, going to a bank physically and talking to a banker, or if you use an online account, chatting with a banker. That way you can get the best account for you. The other thing to look at is ATM fees. ATMs charge on both ends if you are using an ATM not affiliated with your bank. So let's say I have Bank of America and I go to a Chase ATM. If I use the Chase ATM, Chase will charge me a fee for using their ATM, and Bank of America will charge me a fee for using someone else's ATM. So it's really important to remember that even if an ATM says it's free, it's probably going to charge, your bank will probably charge you. Some accounts will waive this fee. depending on, or like they'll do like the first 5 or something, or online banks generally have partnerships with different banks. It's definitely worth looking out for. Credit unions often will have partnerships as well. Savings accounts are where you keep money that you're intending to keep long term. So you're earning interest on that money, which means that every month there's, or well, generally it's monthly, but sometimes it's yearly or quarterly. You'll earn interest on the money that you have in the account. And it seems small, it's often a couple cents. Interest on savings accounts at physical banks is often, right now, is about 0.5% on the better accounts. So you're not earning much money from that, but it does add up. And it's a good way to incentivize keeping your money in savings. It's important to know that money that's put into savings account is limited to only 6 transfers a month into your checking account. That's actually a federal government thing. It's a law. So if you transfer 7 times, like if you overdraft a bunch of times and it transfers money from your account, or if you keep having to pull more money into your checking account to cover your expenses, that can cause, I think it's $100 fine from the government. So be careful with that. Same thing here, look out for a minimum balance requirement. Sometimes there'll be a charge if you're not keeping a certain amount of money in there. And also check out the interest rate. And here's where I'd really recommend looking at online banks like Simple or Ally. Those have higher interest rates, sometimes as much as 1% or more higher. So you could be earning, instead of 0.5% on your bank account, 1.5%, which is a huge difference when you're talking about percentages that small. Also look at credit unions, especially if you don't have a lot of credit, which we're going to talk about in a minute. If you don't have a lot of credit, no, it's 6 times a month. Sorry, Katie. It's 6 times a month that you have that limit. It resets at the beginning of the month. So if you, it's actually a fair amount. But let's say like you go $20 over on your bank account, you don't want to transfer that money and then have to transfer it again because you keep overdrafting. So it's wise, if you go over your budget for the month and it's like the 15th, you may want to transfer more than you think you need from your savings account. So like instead of transferring the $20 you went over, transfer like $100 so you don't keep having to dip into your savings. So yeah, definitely check out local banks and credit unions as well, because sometimes they're a little bit more flexible with the requirements for opening a bank account. Sometimes if you have poor credit or very little credit, national banks may not offer you as good as an account, but credit unions or a local bank may be more willing to work with you on that. Credit unions also offer some other benefits, and they're definitely worth looking into, but they do have disadvantages. They, like I said before about ATM fees, it's possible you could incur more ATM fees because you wouldn't have access to as many ATMs. Also, like for instance, I'm originally from Maryland, and when I first moved here, I wanted a bank that was available in Maryland as well, so that if I needed to give my mom money or you know, I was there to visit, I picked Chase because there are locations in both places. So incidentally, Chase is now closed in Maryland. But at the time it was a good choice. And also right now I use PNC as a bank, which doesn't have locations in New Orleans, but I really like. So it's up to you. Definitely consider different options. They have PNC also, the checking account that I have doesn't charge ATM fees. They reimburse any ATM fees from a third-party bank. So definitely look around, look at different benefits, talk to bankers. Doing your research in general when we're talking about financial things makes a big difference. All right. So I'm going to talk about monetary instruments, which is a term that you might not be familiar with. Monetary instruments are any item that's assigned value that doesn't have an intrinsic value. So gold has an intrinsic value, like you could sell someone gold for a certain amount of money. But even paper money, like a US dollar bill, doesn't have money except for we assign it value. So things like personal checks are a monetary instrument, and anything that can be considered a monetary instrument, so any piece of paper that you could trade for money, should be considered like cash. So if you write a check and you lose it, it would be fraud, but somebody could cash it. And that's something to always remember. Or if you buy a money order for your rent and you don't fill it out and you drop it, anyone could cash it. The first type I'll talk about is personal checks. So if you have a checking account, personal checks are something that is available to you. They're obviously way less common than they used to be. you might want to have them on hand for things where you occasionally have to write checks. It's the easiest monetary instrument to have. I just really want to quickly, I know a lot of people don't learn how to write checks, so I just really want to quickly go over a couple of things on this. So the date is important. If you do not cash a check within 90 days of its issuance, it's no longer available. So available to the person who's going to cash it. So if they take it to a bank, the bank was not going to take it. This is also a really, I actually used to be a bank teller also, but this is a really common problem at the beginning of a year. Let's say like at the on, oops, sorry. Crap. Oh my God, okay. Banks will look at the year at like January 1st, and it'll say like January 1st, 2019, and then that cash is, or that check is invalid. So just keep an eye on any checks that you receive and make sure that you are cashing them in time. So, and then pay to the order of should be the person's legal name. If it has two people in it, they both need to sign. And if they're not on a bank account together, then they have to both be present when you deposit or cash the check. The amount is written out in numbers and then written out in words. The memo isn't something that the bank is really going to pay attention to, but that's for your personal records or for the person that you give it to. And then your name should be signed in the right corner. At the bottom, when you're, say you need to give your routing number for a, having a routing number that you need to supply for a direct deposit, for instance, this would be the first set of numbers on the check. I'm going to send out a copy of this PowerPoint presentation afterwards, so you'll have it for reference. But the first section here is the routing number, and then the second section is your account number. So if you ever need to supply that for someone who definitely should have it, be careful of that, then that's where it is. Money orders, I feel like, are probably the monetary instrument that most people are familiar with at this point. A lot of people I know pay their rent with them, and I definitely used to. They're prepaid, so you buy them with cash from an office or from a post office or a grocery store or something like that, a corner store. The problem with personal checks is that places won't take them sometimes because if they don't know you, so like if when you buy, like you put a down payment on an apartment or something like that, you put your deposit in, they might not take a personal check because they don't know you. So it could theoretically bounce, which is when you don't have the funds in your account to cover the check, so it can't be cashed or deposited. Your bank may or may not cover that as well, so they might not get their money. And if it bounces and they do cover it, there's usually a fee for you. So they're generally about $1 each to purchase. They're considered guaranteed funds, which means that cash was used to purchase them. So the money is there and available to the person who's going to cash or deposit it. Usually a small portion is available that day if you deposit it into your checking account. And then the rest is available the next day or 2 days after, depending on your account. They are limited in value. I believe it's $500. You can't get one for more than that. You can always get more than one if you needed it. And one of the huge benefits of a money order is that you don't need a bank account to get it. So people that don't have bank accounts are able to pay with a monetary instrument this way. So they work kind of like checks. Like you'll see on the Western Union one on the right, you write the pay to the order of below that, and then the memo is next to it. And then you sign underneath where the memo is. I don't really know. I haven't seen one of these that has a purchaser address on it, but there's usually a place to write your name, that it's from you. This one looks a little bit different actually than most ones I've seen. The post office ones look a little bit different. They're the one on the left. Yeah, so this one makes more sense. It has pay to, so you put the person's name and then their address underneath, and on the right-hand side, you would write your name and your address and then a memo at the bottom. I recommend filling these out as soon as you get them with the pay to the order of, because like I said before, they're as good as cash. So if you dropped it, it would be gone and someone could write their own name in it and easily cash it. These also come with a receipt, and there are ways you can get your money back from them, but I'm not going to go into that. So if it was lost and you had the receipt, you may be able to get your money back, but I'm not going to go into that. It's complicated. The next one I'm going to talk about is cashier's checks, which is something you may not have encountered at this point in your financial life. It's obtained from and guaranteed by a bank, so it is backed by money, and the money comes directly out of your bank account. You have to have a bank account to get one of these. They generally don't have a limit, so they're often used, like you can see this one's for $14,000. They're generally used for large purchases, like putting a down payment on a house is the most common one, or maybe on a car. They usually have a higher fee, so the money order costs like $1. A cashier's check often costs like $10 to $20. Oh my God, sorry about this. My mouse has a roller ball on it. They usually have a higher fee, and then but they are guaranteed by the bank, which is a big benefit for you. You have more recourse if they get lost, and you're able to see when they're cashed and that kind of thing. They're printed by the bank and signed by someone at the bank, so they're not signed by you. So you definitely need to make sure that there's usually a spot. Yeah, it does say it here. There's a spot that says remitter, and that's the person that purchased the check. So your name would be printed on it as well. So that's monetary instruments. I just wanted to go through that because I feel like they're not as commonly used now, and it's important to know what they are and what your options are when you're paying for things. Let's see. Okay. So next we're going to talk about credit, which includes credit cards to some extent, but mostly we're going to talk about your credit score and building credit and how your credit can be damaged. So your credit score is a score between 300 and 850 generally. If it's lower than 300, I've never seen a score lower than 300, but it's basically a grade about how good you are at paying your bills. So there are a lot of different people that can end up using this, but basically we're going to talk about the models that are used and who keeps track of it first. So there are two different models that are most commonly used, and we'll go over them in a second and what makes them up. But they're FICO, which is the one you've most likely heard of. It's definitely the most common, and then Vantage Score. There are several others that are used by specific industries, but these are the most common. And then there are 3 credit bureaus, and they're the ones that keep track of your credit. So your credit includes a bunch of different things, and we'll go over that in a second as well. But they're TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. So if you were going to get a credit report, generally it would be from one of these 3 places. The scores vary, and you're given a title for how good your score is. So they use slightly different terminology. You can see on the chart below. Basically, it's like the top rating is usually in the 800s, and then yeah, Vantage Score is a little bit different, but we'll go over FICO. So above 800 is exceptional for FICO. Very good is between 740 and 799. And then basically below in the fair and poor category is when you might start having issues with getting credit or getting a bad interest rate or that kind of thing. So I'm gonna go to the next slide. This is what makes up your credit score. So Vantage Score and FICO do look at slightly different things. Vantage Score is more complicated and isn't used as much. We're going to go over FICO, but it's here if you wanted to see what it is. So it looks, the thing that looks most at 35% is your payment history, which is how on time you've paid your debts. And if you have any outstanding debt, so like if you have old credit card debt, that kind of thing, that will be in that 35%. 30% is the amount that you owe on debt. So like if you have a student loan and there's outstanding amounts, whether it's current or not, that'll be in that part. 15% is the length of your credit history. So when you're young and you haven't had a credit card for a long time, you will have a shorter credit history. And then, so like your oldest debt is the extent of your credit history. Your credit mix is 10%, and that's like what you have. This is weird. I'm not exactly sure how they rate this. It's things like if you have loans and credit cards and a mortgage and like different types of loans, that's your credit mix, is the different types of debts you have. So when you pull a full credit report, it has a list of all of these things. And so some places may favor one way or the other. If you've paid off a mortgage, that's going to look good. But if you have if you have like several outstanding loans and a mortgage and credit card debt, it's not going to look good. And then new credit. So when you start a bunch of new credit cards or put in a bunch of loan applications all at once, that can negatively affect your credit. So if you apply to like 4 credit cards with the intention of only getting 1 credit card, if they do what's called a hard pull on your credit, so they pull your full credit report, that affects your credit. It'll lower it by a few points. So like, for instance, my husband and I recently bought a house, and when we had our credit pulled for different loan applications, that negatively affected our credit, which is unfortunate because you're trying to get the best deal. But we applied 3 places and our credit lowered each about like 6 points. And you do have a separate credit score from your spouse, if anyone is curious. It doesn't combine when you get married or anything. It doesn't get averaged. So who might look at your credit card or your credit score? So banks for sure are going to look. When you open an account, the services they offer you is affected by your credit. For instance, I actually had a friend at one point who couldn't open a bank account because his credit was so bad. Landlords can look at your credit score. This is more likely going to happen if you're applying in like an apartment building that has a property management company, not necessarily in a place that like you're renting from someone's house. Credit card companies for sure look at your credit score, and utility companies can look at your credit score. They legally cannot deny you service, but they can force you to pay a deposit if they feel like you may not pay. How can you look at your credit report? This is really important. The federal government entitles you to see your credit report once a year. The website is annualcreditreport.com. I'm going to send out a list of resources and that will be on there. But it doesn't give you your score from any of the credit bureaus. It gives you just the report, which is fantastic for tracking delinquencies. For instance, let's say you went to the hospital, they sent you a bill and you never got it. You could see on your credit report that you have a delinquent charge from the hospital. It needs to be paid, and you can track down that debt. It's also really good for identifying fraud. I recommend that you do check this once a year. I check mine every August. It just happened that way. And then also, in the past few years, credit card companies have started offering services where you're able to look at your actual score. Discover and Capital One both offer this service for free for anyone, not just cardholders. It's supposed to make you want to become a cardholder. But you're able to check this at any time. Discover pulls your Experian report. Experian is one of the 3 credit bureaus, and it's a FICO score. Capital One, I think, is also a FICO score, and that's your TransUnion score. These can vary by like up to 50 points, depending on what has been reported to which credit agencies by different people. So it's good to be able to check both of them. That's 2 out of your 3 credit scores right there, which is really useful. And you can pull those at any time. I think Capital One's pulls every time you pull it. And I think Discover's updates monthly. So starting or rebuilding credit. Having no credit is really hard, and having poor credit is really hard. So I at one point did have really, really bad credit. I maxed out 2 credit cards and was able to pay them off and repair my credit, basically using the strategies I'm going to talk to you about. So the first thing that you can do to rebuild your credit is a secured credit card. And this is what I did and was able to repair my credit pretty well. So most likely, if you have bad credit, you're not going to be able to get a regular credit card. There are some credit cards. I seriously recommend doing your research. I'll again have resources for you about secured credit cards. Some of them are kind of a scam, but basically any secured credit card that has high fees or offers you credit above the amount that you've secured is probably not a good choice. There's often a lot of stuff going on there and you could end up losing money on it. But basically, the concept is that you put down a deposit and that equals the amount that you're able to spend. So for instance, I put $200 in. I had a really small secured credit card. So you put $200, you give them $200, and then each month you're allowed to spend $200 and pay it back. So essentially this is low risk for them because they already have your $200 and you can't spend more than that. So if you end up not paying the bill, they have the money. The payments build your credit. And then after you are starting to build your credit, some of these are convertible into regular credit cards. Discover actually has a really awesome secured credit card that can turn into a regular credit card. I would recommend looking into that. But yeah, you can start with a really low balance and still build your credit pretty well. Another option, and this is really good for starting your credit specifically, is to become an authorized user on a friend, well, not a friend, a partner or family member's credit card. It has to be someone for sure that trusts you, because you have to use the card responsibly. For instance, my mom actually put me on her credit card when I was like 14 as an authorized user, and I never had the credit card. But what this does is it allows you to piggyback on the credit that has already been on this card. So it gave me like 20 years, like older than I was, of good credit. And you can do this at any time. Also, when you are attempting to get unsecured credits, that would be something where you didn't put a deposit down. You can use a cosigner. So a lot of you may have had to do this when you got your first apartment and had no credit. You have someone else sign on the loan with you to guarantee it. It does mean that that person could be liable for your debt, though. So again, it has to be someone that trusts you. Okay, so this is most of the credit stuff that I'm talking about. There's more, but I do want to stress that I realize this is confusing, and please do let me know if you it's a big concept, if you have questions. So how do you maintain your credit? One of the best and easiest ways you can do that is have and use a credit card responsibly. The key here, this is a big important number, is to use 30% of your available credit. So for instance, I had a $200 secured credit card. So I used $60 every month and paid it off at the end of the month. Basically, the way that I did this was I just put I put my phone bill and I think Netflix added up to it. At the time, my phone bill is much higher now. But you put those two together, and I would pay that automatically and then pay it at the end of the month. So I'd automatically be using 30% of my available credit and then paying it off, which is the ideal percentage to build credit. The most important thing you can do with a credit card is pay it off monthly. You should limit the number of credit cards you have. As I said before, if you apply for a bunch of credit cards at once, you are going to damage your credit. And also, the more credit cards you have, the easier it is to overspend, and also the harder it is to track your expenses. Pay all your bills on time. Utilities definitely are going to report to credit agencies if you consistently pay not on time. Hospitals report. Trying to think of some other stuff. Technically, landlords can report. I've never actually seen that. And the other thing is keep your existing accounts open. If you opened like a store credit card, like you opened a J. Crew credit card to get a discount on a suit or something like that, don't close it after you used it, even if you don't intend to use it. When you close accounts, it also negatively can affect your credit. So of course it's okay to close accounts, but like if you close your bank account and 3 credit cards at once, it's definitely going to affect your credit. Why would you want a credit card after we're talking about all this? It seems like a lot of risk. It helps you build credit. You can earn rewards. A lot of credit cards have rewards associated with them. And it gives you the flexibility to pay for things in emergencies. Like if you haven't budgeted for it and so you don't have a lot in savings, if your car has a problem, you can pay for it, that kind of thing. The risks of having a credit card are obviously that it's easy to spend outside your means. You can spend money you don't have. There are fees. Credit card interest is extraordinarily high. For instance, your student loans are probably like 4.5%. Credit card interest rates are usually above 20. It's really expensive debt. And also, if you use the card improperly, it could damage your credit. When you're considering a credit card, look at the credit limit. A lot of times, it means that if they give you a credit that's too high, it can be a problem because it can make it easy for you to spend more than you should. Oftentimes they'll give students really high credit limits because they're kind of counting on you to spend too much. But if you don't have a lot of credit after college, they won't. Look at the interest rate. Like I said, interest rates for credit cards are extremely high. If you can get something with a lower interest rate or like first year 0%, definitely look into that if you think you might carry a balance that you really shouldn't. And look at rewards. So one of my budgeting strategies, which we'll get more into budgeting in a second, is actually I spend exclusively on my credit card and pay it back every month. And I have a Capital One card that gives me 1.5% back on every purchase. So it's like having 1.5% off everything. Other cards do it differently, like definitely another thing to do research on. And that's a good way to like save yourself money. Discovered has like a 5% cash back quarterly. I think they might have stopped that, but definitely look into it. You can also earn things like airline miles if you fly home a lot or something. Southwest's credit card is pretty decent. There are lots of different credit cards to look at though. So I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat. I'm actually going to answer questions about credit now because it is complicated and I want to make sure that we get to them. So let's see. Ali, do you have any suggestions for online savings accounts? For sure, there are a lot of them. I have an Ally account. They're easy to work with. I don't recall, it's my savings account. I don't recall what their ATM policy is. They do have checking accounts though. Simple, I know people really like their app, which is really helpful if you're using an online bank because you can't physically go in to the bank. So having good interaction with them online is important. Aside from that, not necessarily. There are a ton of them. Definitely look into different ones. Ally has been around for a long time and I've had that account for a long time. Javier, can you clarify what you mean about checks issued by the government? And I'll come back to that. What if you've used more than 30% and can make payments, but the score is going down as you slowly pay off? Okay, so Alexandra, if you have used more than 30% and make payments and you're slowly paying off your card, that's just how it's going to happen, unfortunately. I'm really proud of you for paying off your debt, though. If you're slowly making payments, that's awesome. Pay as much as you can each month. As long as you're paying the minimum payment, that's the best you can do. I would recommend, once you're able to get that down, looking up different methods for building credit. It sounds like you're at least aware of your credit score, which is great. There are lots of different methods, and I'm going to share some websites that have stuff with that. But yeah, unfortunately, like it's hard to stop your credit score from going down when you have debt. Cortland, what are you asking about student loans also, if you want to clarify? So I'll come back to Javier and Cortland when those are clarified. Let me see. Alexandra, thinking of getting a loan to pay off my credit. That's not a horrible idea. Again, that's something I would talk to a banker about. If you're able, refinancing debt is definitely an option. I'm going to talk a little bit more about debt in a little bit. Refinancing debt is an option for sure. Another thing you might want to look into is transferring your credit card balance to something with a lower APR, which is the interest rate. There are cards that will let you do that. You can get a personal loan for sure to pay back credit. Talk to a banker about it. They'll be able to get you a better idea of what is available to you. And if the payments are something that you're able to make on the loan monthly, then that might be a good option for you. Javier, I'm sorry, I guess I don't know when you asked the original question. What are you asking about the stimulus check? Like where to save it, or what are you asking? How do student loans affect your credit? So as long as you're paying them, it's complicated in the situation with AmeriCorps. I believe all of your loans can be forbeared while you're in AmeriCorps, so you don't have to pay them. If you have payment, like you should talk to your program manager about that, but if you haven't talked to them already about it. But if you have student loans where payments are due and you're not paying them on time, that can affect your credit. It'll affect it negatively. Any loans that you're not paying on time. Oh, Bree. So the reason that I use a credit card, I'll actually come back to that, but the reason that I use the credit card to pay all of my expenses monthly is just to get, the reason I need to, I do that way is so that I get the percentage off. That's the benefit for me. And it helps me maintain my credit. Okay. The only other question I'm going to answer right now is Javier's whenever that comes up, but I'm going to move on. No, loan forbearance doesn't affect your credit, Alyssa. Okay.
Hi, Kristen. If you can hear me.
Yes.
This it was a two-part question. It should have been just the first one. So if you receive you mentioned that a personal check or another type of check would be good for 90 days, but a
Yes.
government issued check should be worth for a longer time, correct?
It should not be. You should deposit or generally check. Sometimes it'll be 180 days for certain checks, but check, it'll say it on the check, usually by the date, if it's a printed check from the government. Any check you get, you should deposit or cash as soon as you get it. That's definitely the best move, just so you don't lose it also. But as far as I know, government checks are also 90 days. I think it depends on the check, but it should say it on there.
Thanks, Kristen.
Yeah, I don't actually know because mine came as a direct deposit, so sorry. Okay, so budgeting. Why should you budget? So somebody's not muted. So why should you budget? Budgeting is a good way to reach long-term non-financial goals. So ultimately, unfortunately, when you think about it, most things boil down to being a financial goal. So if you want to travel or get a car, or if you want to change careers, you need money to do that, unfortunately. Budgeting gives you more flexibility. Ultimately, it seems like a rigid way of operating, but once it becomes a habit, it's actually a great way to be able to spend the money you want when you want it. It also removes the stress of having to consider each purchase. You know what money you have, so you know what you can spend. And again, it eliminates having to think about each purchase you make. Why is this not moving? Okay, so the first step to budgeting, this is, unfortunately, I think we might go a little long, guys, I'm sorry. We're on slide 18 and we still have like 15 to go. So, but a lot of the complicated stuff was in the beginning. So you're gonna figure out what you spend first. That's the most important first step in budgeting. You wanna create a realistic budget. You don't wanna just start out with a number and it turns out you're not even covering your rent. So what I recommend you do is, like, as this person in this picture did, which is from the Budget Mom, which you can check out. It didn't look awesome. So first you're gonna write down every purchase that you make. So if you get cash out, I would recommend writing down each purchase or saving the receipts from that. But honestly, for this exercise, it's easier if you use a bank card or a credit card for most of these, just because you'll have a record of what you've spent that you're able to get from the creditor. You can use, for this, honestly, I think writing it down on paper is easiest, or using a spreadsheet. I've created a spreadsheet that I'm going to share with you guys where you can track a month worth of spending and see what you're spending on. So once you have written down all of your expenses, you're going to go back and categorize them. I think you can see that she did that, but at the top of the thing, the very right page, you can see she has a key and then has highlighted each thing and made it a category, and then totaled up what she spent in each category. Hopefully you spent less than you made. And then you're going to look for patterns. So let's say every Friday night you go to the same bar and buy the same 3 drinks. Maybe you could be buying 1 drink and drinking a beer at home or something like that. You know, it just really depends on, or like every Wednesday you buy lunch out with your friend. Maybe you guys could pack a lunch together, that kind of thing. You're going to look for patterns. So first, we're going to talk about creating your budget after you've determined your spending. So the goal for most people, according to NerdWallet, which is a wonderful finance website, is a 50-30-20 budget. So it'd be 50% needs, 30% wants, and 20% savings and debt repayment. More realistically, for an AmeriCorps member and anyone earning not enough money to be putting money into retirement, that kind of thing, I think it's more realistic to do 70-20-10. 70% would be on your needs, 20% would be on your wants, and 10% would be in savings and debt repayment. So the reason I put it this way is because of cost of living, which we can talk about later, but it's more realistic that to pay your rent, you're going to need more money than 50% of the AmeriCorps stipend would give you. So I have all the numbers I have used in all of this are based on, so you get $1,200-ish a month from AmeriCorps. With taxes for most locations, that's going to come out to be in the neighborhood of $1,100. So for our realistic budget, that would give you $770 for rent, plus any other needs you have, which I'm going to go over in a second, $220 for wants, and $110 for savings and any debt repayment that you have. So needs would include anything that you would have to pay every month. So your rent, your phone bill, your utilities, which I will say, like, what you consider a necessary utility is up to you. So if you absolutely need internet in your house, then that's a utility. If you absolutely need Netflix, then that's a utility. But the transportation, so that would include like public transit costs, or if you are paying a car payment, but that would also include gas, any tolls that you pay. Groceries, this is food that you buy to cook at home. Health insurance, if that is not already taken out of your paycheck. Medical and hygiene items, so like if you have any medications that are prescribed to you, or like you have to buy shampoo. Minimum debt payments, so if you have credit card debt and you have to pay $25 each month, that $25 is part of your need. Any childcare that you need. Wants would include things like dining out, entertainment, clothing. You know what you want, you know what's in that category. Savings and debt repayments, so anything that is over your minimum debt payment is a debt repayment. So for instance, like you have the $25 a month minimum payment on your credit card, but you actually owe $5,000. Anything that you pay over that 25 is a debt repayment. Then I'm going to talk about what you should be saving for. So the two other areas you should be focusing on for saving are your emergency fund and personal savings. So picking, I think this is out of order. Okay, well, so there are different types of budget plans you can use once you decide how to budget your money. And there are a bunch of different ones. I'm going to go over 4 really quickly. So one is from You Need a Budget, which is a wonderful website and app. It does cost $12 a month, I believe, for the full version, but it's really good. The 3 out of the 4 basic principles for You Need a Budget are to give every dollar a job, which is, I think, the most important budgeting principle in general, whether you use a system or not. So basically, you should budget every dollar. Don't leave like $100 at the end that has no job. If you have $100 left, put that in your entertainment fund or put that in your savings for your vacation. Every dollar should be accounted for at the beginning of the month. Be realistic, which is what I was talking about when you're tracking your expenses. Make sure that every expense you have is realistically accounted for. If, like, obviously you can change what you're spending. You shouldn't be spending $500 a month on going out, but do give yourself a going out budget. You're not going to stop going out. And be flexible. So if during the month you overspend in a category, don't just go, oh, well, I'm going to overspend. Move that money from a different category. So edit your budget as you have to during the month. And if it's a consistent edit that you're having to make that a permanent change. The book Broke Millennial, which is awesome and is the book I definitely recommend the most, ends up using something that she calls the no budget budget. So she starts with a cash diet. She calls it a juice cleanse. She's very hip. That's the way I would describe her. She thinks she's really hip. But you start with a cash diet, which is basically you only use cash for a month so that you're physically seeing what you're spending on everything. It's really hard to do, but definitely worthwhile because it's like you buy things online. Pay yourself first. So after you pay all of your necessary expenses, she recommends putting money in savings first. So you're paying yourself. And then spend aligned with your values is her main thing. She doesn't actually keep track of all of her expenses each day. So like if your values are like self-care or, like eating at home or anything that you put a value on, if you align yourself with those values, it should come naturally. And then she does a weekly check-in on paper to figure out if she's staying on budget. Dave Ramsey's envelope system. I'm going to quickly say Dave Ramsey is an evangelical Christian. A lot of his programs run through churches. He has a lot of valuable information, but be aware that there's a whole lifestyle that goes with it. I'll say that's true with a lot of budgeting systems. There's definitely a lifestyle, but I just want you to be aware that there is a church element in his. He developed the envelope system though, which was really popular. So at the beginning of the month, it's a cash-based system. At the beginning of the month, you get out all of your money and you put it in envelopes labeled with the amount that you have for each category of spending. So like groceries or rent, that kind of thing. You put it in an envelope and you can only spend that money from that envelope. It's not flexible at all. It's a zero-based budget. This works really well for people who work well within systems. It never worked for me. I've tried it, but it definitely works well if you are inclined to follow things and have good willpower. You can't shuffle money between envelopes. It's inflexible. You can only use what's in the envelope. You can't dig into your savings for anything. If you have an emergency or like want to buy something that's outside of it, he recommends having an accountability buddy that you tell you want to buy things to. There are apps now that you can use, and I'll go into them later, that you can use for this. Daily budgeting is something that might work really well for some people. So basically, after you subtract all your needs from your budget, you divide what's left by the number of days in the month. For instance, if you had no expenses in April, you would have $36 a day. And then you can spend that money. There are some really cool apps that'll track this for you. So if you don't spend $36 in one day, it'll show you that you have X amount of dollars the next day to spend. Let's see, I'm trying to speed up a little bit. Savings and debt repayment. This is the order you should be saving in. Yeah, I want to make sure I had the emergency fund. Your starter emergency fund, which is what you need in case you have emergencies, then paying off toxic debt, which is like high interest credit cards, personal loans that are high interest. That's the first thing you should pay off. And then you should fund your intermediate emergency fund. I'm going to go into this again. Then your personal savings, so that'll be like your vacation fund, your fund money. Any remaining debt you have, which is like student loans, that kind of stuff, try to pay that off. It's not realistic that you're going to pay it all off. Like you're not going to pay your mortgage off, but putting more money towards debt you have is a good choice. And then a full emergency fund. So your emergency fund, what like Susie Orman and a lot of other people who are financial experts say, it should be 6 months of your necessary expenses. So this doesn't include, if you have an emergency, you're not going to be able to spend fund money. So let's say you are using the 70-20-10 model and you get $1,100 a month. 70% of that is $770. 6 months would be $4,620. So I realize that's a really daunting number. That's a lot to save when you're not making a lot of money. So your emergency starter fund, as we talk about here, number one, would be $500. That should, if you need a car part or you have a medical bill that's unexpected, that should get you part of the way there at the very least. Then number three, the intermediate emergency fund would be 3 months. So that's $2,310 if you're following that model. Much more doable number than the original 6 month amount, but that's really good if you like lose your job and need to pay rent for a couple months. That'll cover you. And then when you create your full emergency fund, the last step, that would be the 6 months. An emergency fund is really important, and most places will tell you to fund that first. This is just a quick, I'm going to give you a slide. This is a quick way to find some savings. Look for patterns in your spending. I talked about that before. So like if you're constantly, like if every day you're going and getting coffee at 3 o'clock, that's fine. You can keep your latte, but maybe do it every other day. Also, like an example from Broke Millennial that she uses is like her friend would go to Starbucks and get a bottle of water every day for $3. She lives in New York. For $3 and use that as an excuse to go on a walk. So for her, that ended up being, it's $15 a week. That's $60 a month that she could be spending on something else. If she wants to go for a walk, she should just go for a walk. Create a goal. That's a really good way to encourage yourself to save. So either it's going to be a goal for a specific amount or a specific item. So like you want to go on vacation, this vacation will cost you X amount of money. The big thing is to change your attitude. Unsubscribe from store emails that you're getting that might tempt you. So like if you constantly spend money at ASOS and you get ASOS emails, unsubscribe from them so you don't want to buy the things they're sending you. A really good way to keep yourself from spending things is calculate how many hours a purchase would take you to earn. So when you're calculating how many hours it takes you, include things like your commute. Like I live an hour away from the New Orleans office. I live over the bridge. And then we got like an hour for lunch. So that's 11 hours. So I would divide, not 8. So I divide my daily wage by 11 instead of 8. And then I can figure out like if, let's say I'm making, for ease, let's say I'm making $10 an hour and I'm working 10 hours, including stuff. So, does that make sense? No, I'm working 8 hours and it takes me 10 hours to do my work related activities. So I'm making $80, but I'm actually making $8 an hour, not $10 an hour. So if I want to buy a top that's $24, that's 3 hours of work. That's something to think about. Buy for quality, not quantity. So maybe instead of buying the $24 top, I buy the $50 top. That's much better quality, but I will have it for much longer. Make a grocery list. This made a huge difference in my life. Instead of impulse buying when you get to the grocery store, plan your meals ahead of time. That way you'll have leftovers and you'll spend less money on food that you throw away. I'm just going to quickly go through the rest of these. Libraries have streaming services that's worth looking into. Canopy is one of them. I can't remember the name of the one that's in New Orleans, but there are a bunch of others where you can watch movies. You can also download the Libby app, which you can get audiobooks and ebooks from. Actually look at your bills. It's really important to know what you're paying for. You might be charged for something you no longer have, or you might be paying more than you need to for a service. It's definitely worth calling places and asking for discounts, especially for phone and internet. They'll usually give you a deal if you say you're going to cancel. Rewards credit cards I talked about. Hide your savings from yourself. So my big savings account is at Ally, but I bank with my checking at PNC, and I have a small savings account there that I have for overdraft protection, and I really recommend that method. If you can't see it, you won't spend it. You can negotiate credit card debt with the credit once it goes to collections, which is what I did. Usually they'll let you make a lump payment for less than the amount of the credit card debt, just to get rid of as much of it as they can. Negotiate medical bills. They will almost always negotiate down with you. Hospital bills for sure. There's a bunch of options for debt repayment. I'm going to send you these links. There are lots of different ways. Broke Millennials Guide, I think, is maybe the best. It's part of one of her courses, which you technically have to pay for, but the transcripts are free. So you can see that, but she talks about a lot of other people's methods, including Dave Ramsey's snowball method. So resources, again, I'm going to send this out. Broke Millennial and Your Money or Your Life are the two big ones that I definitely think are the best. Your Money or Your Life has a movement associated with it called Financial Independence, Retire Early, or FIRE, which is kind of like a cult. It's definitely more of a self-help book feeling. It's a little bit harder to read, but it does have a lot of good information about shifting your mentality around savings. Broke Millennial is really realistically and written, and it's easy to read. I definitely recommend it. The other books that I've put here I have not read, but I know a lot of people really like them. Let's see. AmeriCorps has a bunch of resources for you. Definitely talk to your program manager. You're eligible for SNAP or food stamp benefits while you're at AmeriCorps, which is up to $200 a month. SBP offers a housing stipend for repeating members of $150 a month. Definitely worthwhile looking into. Loan forbearance is a thing that we touched on, but you don't have to pay your student loans while you're an AmeriCorps member. We should talk about that. There's childcare coverage and health insurance as well. Definitely talk to your program manager. These are websites I definitely recommend. A lot of these have associated apps. I've talked about a lot of this stuff. Regions Bank Next Step program has it's a bunch of stuff put together. Regions is a bank local to Louisiana. That's the only one we haven't really talked about. Dave Ramsey's website also has a bunch of podcasts. associated with it, in addition to a bunch of other things. I haven't listened to any of them. I don't really like factual podcasts. So these are some good general resources. Expanding on ideas. So like these are things that if you want to get deeper into finance stuff, CNBC has a thing called millennial money, which I realize a lot of people are actually not millennials that are using this information. I think this is part of the misconception that millennials are very young, which a lot of them are not anymore. But CNBC has a series called Millennial Money that talks about like young people's relationship with money. That's kind of interesting. There's a website called Bullish that is run by a woman who transitioned from a corporate job into tutoring. It definitely is like a lifestyle blog, but she has a lot of advice columns and stuff kind of interesting about starting your first job. Struggle with Meals is really fun. Some of it's available on Hulu, I think, actually, but the website also has videos, but they make really cheap meals for like dinner parties and weekdays and all kinds of things. NerdWallet has a really good credit card guide where you can put in like different factors and it'll help you find the best credit card for you. Budgeting, there's a bunch of budget calculators online. These are 3 that I really like. Money Under 30 has a budget spreadsheet that's really good that you fill in numbers on. It's an Excel spreadsheet. I don't know if it'll import into Google Sheets if you don't have Excel, I'm not sure. The National Foundation for Credit Counseling, which is a really good resource if you're in debt as well, has a bunch of different calculators and budget worksheets that you can work through. And then the Economic Policy Institute has a cost of living calculator that I think is really interesting. So you can see what the average costs are in your area for one person, or 2 people, or 2 people and a kid. And it'll calculate what you really need to be making to pay the average amount in each place. You can compare different locations, which is interesting. But it'll give you a good idea of helping you with budgeting for, let's say, your groceries, that kind of thing. Then I'm going to talk about apps really quickly. I have an iPhone. I have tried all of these on iPhone, not on Android. I think most of them are also available on Android, but I'm not positive. Clarity Money and Mint are both associated with banks, or Mint might be associated with Intuit that does like TurboTax. They import your bank transactions, your credit cards, all kinds of stuff, and automatically put in your transactions for you. Mint allows you to add transactions yourself. Clarity does not, which I'm not really a fan of. So if you want to put in transactions manually, you can't. So if you spend cash on something, it'll just show that you withdrew cash from your account, but it won't show what it was for. Both of them have budgeting functions. They're not great. The envelope system and zero-based budgeting, which is like the Dave Ramsey thing, Dave Ramsey has an app called Every Dollar that will help you make a zero-based budget. You can share that with another person, which is rare with these apps. Good Budget is like literally just an envelope system that's been made into an app, so it's very simple. Comprehensive tracking apps, the 2 best, in my opinion, budgeting apps are You Need a Budget and Dollar Bird. Both of these are paid. I think they both have free trials. Dollar Bird has some functionality without ever paying for it, I believe. They both have more functions. Dollar Bird you can share with another person. So if you have like a partner, or if you want to share expenses with your roommate, if you guys share like a grocery budget, that kind of thing, you're able to track that. They have integration with bank accounts, all kinds of stuff. You Need a Budget has like a lot of courses and stuff that are associated with it. They're both really good. Others that you can try are Daily Budget, which is the name of the app, and it is for daily budgeting. And then there's Acorns, which you connect your bank account to, and then it rounds your purchases up to the nearest dollar and takes that money. So if you spent like $1.40, it would take the 60 cents up to $2, put it in your Acorns account, and then it invests that money for you in stocks and bonds. Other things to keep in mind are here's some podcasts. You don't have to use an app to budget. There are spreadsheets available to you. I have a list of them that I'm going to send out. And you can use a physical ledger book too, if that works for you. Okay, now we're going to do questions. Sorry, I'm running a little bit over. Let me see what's in here. James, I'm going to send this presentation to everybody. Let's see. Alexander pointed out that when you pay your credit card off each month, it does help build your credit. Yeah, I agree. Using a credit card is a great way to build your credit in general. If you feel like you can be responsible with a credit card, I definitely recommend it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you guys can actually see me. Okay, so now you guys can actually see me. It is super important to build your credit, especially if you don't have a lot of credit. I definitely would recommend using a credit card if you can use it responsibly, and only if you can use it responsibly. Paige, yes, you're talking about virtual wallet, and they automatically categorize your purchases for you. I have virtual wallet and I love it. PNC has this account that is 3 accounts connected. So it is 2 checking accounts and a savings account. They call them spend, what is it? Spend, save, spend something growth. I don't remember. It's 3 accounts. The spend account is your regular checking account. There is a second checking account that's for short-term savings. It doesn't have any interest, but it's really good. It covers your any like overages that you have if you overdraft, and it also is just really helpful for short-term saving, like if you want to buy something next month. And then a long-term savings account that's connected as well. It's really easy to transfer between them. Their app is really good. It categorizes expenses for you. It makes graphs. If you want to get into this, it's a fun account to have. They do have a minimum balance, average balance of $500, where it's a $12 fee each month, but I really like it. Yeah, Bank of America also categorizes. Most banks, I think, categorize, but a lot of the apps are better. Yes, no healthcare expenses for AmeriCorps members, correct. But I also want to be clear that I know some people are graduating soon, so this is for future expenses as well. James, I'm going to send the presentation to everybody. Nikira recommends Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I've actually heard of that one. Let's see. Yes, I'm going to share the presentation. Oh, Nicole, thank you. Ally's ATM fees. Ally does not charge a fee. They belong to a network, and they are likely ATMs you can find in your city that would be within the network. They also reimburse you a similar amount to use an ATM outside of your network. That's correct, and a lot of online banks do that. Let's see. Would I recommend budgeting apps? Okay, so I actually use a spreadsheet. The reason this works for me is because my husband and I have been doing it for 6 years. And when we started out, there weren't as many options for budgeting apps, and especially not ones we could share. I think budgeting apps are really cool. I've been messing with these for about a week. What I mostly recommend for budgeting is that you do what works for you. It's really important to find a system that works for you. Try out a bunch of different things. If you don't find an app, like that's really why it's great that like things like You Need a Budget that costs money have a free trial. It might be too complicated for you. You might want to try something different. It might work best for you to write stuff down. I've tried a bunch of different things. The spreadsheet ended up working best for me. I am really interested in trying a budgeting app, but my husband is not. And that's an important part of it, is if you're budgeting with another person, it has to work for both of you. I think that's all of the questions. Does anyone have anything else they want to say? Any questions? I'm available. I meant to put my email address on here. I am available via email. I'm going to type my email address because my last name is weird. It's Montleon, same as the hotel. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to email everybody the resources list, the presentation, and the spreadsheet that I made for everybody. But otherwise, y'all have a great day. Thank you for listening for so long. I appreciate you. Seriously, feel free to email me if you have any questions that I didn't cover, if you think of anything later. I appreciate you guys.